Is the DC Universe in trouble? We'll talk about all that and more in this next episode of Talking Movies and More. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, where we love talking about movies and more. I'm your host, Mason Phillips, and this is the 4th episode of Talking Movies and More with Mason Phillips. Today I wanted to talk about the DC Universe. So we just had Supergirl come out in theaters, and unfortunately it's not performing too well. Now, I have some opinions on the movie, but before we go further into that aspect of the film, I wanted to comment and talk about what does this do for the future of the DC Universe. And I think right now, there's a couple options that James Gunn, Peter Safran, and the crew at DC Studios and Warner Brothers have to really look into. One of those is, do they pivot? Now, James Gunn laid out this plan back in 2023 before the films that they had left over from the DCEU came out. At the time, they still had Shazam! Fury of the Gods, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom still set to come out in theaters. They did kind of kneecap those films by announcing there would be a new DC Studios or a new DC Universe after those films came out, so they kind of hampered the box office draw for those films. People just kind of saw those films as dead on arrival. Why do I even bother with these movies when I know they're not going to go anywhere anyway? DC's in a particular position right now. One thing they need to do is decide if they're going to stay the course or if they're going to make some adjustments. Now, I will point back to the DC Extended Universe. This is what the issue with the DC Extended Universe, one of the main issues they had in the DCEU was pivoting when they had a failure. And I'm kind of in a similar situation. The first movie did decent enough that they felt like they could build a universe off of it, both with a Superman movie. We had Man of Steel. Man of Steel had some moderate success. Was overall, I mean, I know it had some mixed reception from fans and critics. Upon kind of looking back on that movie, it's definitely had a much higher appraisal than it used to. But, I mean, I've always loved Man of Steel. It's always been a film that I've really resonated with. It was pretty successful at the box office, and so they felt that they could build a universe off of this. Warner Brothers thought they could chase that MCU magic, so they fast-tracked Batman vs. Superman. I don't think they should have done that, but this isn't really an examination on the DCEU. But the biggest mistake that they made was that when the film wasn't received the way they wanted it to, they quickly started changing up all their plans, kind of re-examining. Do we keep on Zack Snyder? Of course, there was a whole stuff that happened with him with Justice League, the unfortunate passing of Zack Snyder's daughter, the studio using that as cover to get rid of him, then replace him with Joss Whedon. That whole mess, we know how that all went down. That is, in a sense, what kind of killed the DCEU 2 movies in and killed the DCEU because they weren't willing to stick with a plan. They didn't have a hard plan. They kept changing it. So the audience, the fans, never thought they could get invested with the series because of the constant changes, the doubt from the leadership. When the leadership has doubt over these projects, then why should us as fans get excited for where the direction of this universe is going to go? I thought at one point there was some hope with the hope of the Crisis on Infinite Earths that they were kind of building towards out of the Flash movie, but then the Flash was a pretty abysmal project. Now, I appreciate that film for what it is, but there was the whole Ezra Miller mess, the changing of the guard from Walter Hamada. At one point, Dwayne Johnson was trying to take over control, and then finally switched over to James Gunn and Peter Safran. Now, at first, I thought James Gunn and Peter Safran were going to finally put the DCEU on a positive direction, a positive course, but they decided to basically scrap everything except for what James Gunn worked on. Now, I have my issues with that. I think if you're going to restart a universe, reboot a universe, you really should do it from scratch. But he decided to keep the stuff that he had already done. There's reasons for that. Some of it's contract stuff, and then it's just the stuff that he worked on anyway. There's that, but with DCEU, you never knew what direction they were going to go in. The DC Universe, DC Studios cannot do this. If they start questioning themselves the second movie out, start questioning themselves, and then start pivoting so many times that us as the audience never knows what to get invested in or what to look forward to, then this universe is also, like the DCEU, kind of dead on arrival, and we're just going to see it whimper to its ultimate end in maybe another 10 years when they're going to have to do it all over again. Again, that's what the DCU definitely can't do. Another thing they really need to look at. So they can't do this pivot all over again. They can't keep changing it up on us. That's something they definitely can't do. Another thing they definitely need to look into is propping up the bigger characters. Now, Gunn's kind of doing this thing. We had Superman, but a lot of these early projects, you had Creature Commandos. Most of these characters, the audience, the wider DC audience, fans of this stuff, we're not even used to. We don't even know these characters. We're not familiar with these characters. So it's kind of hard for us to get excited and invested in a project that we don't really have any familiarity with. Now, Creature Commandos was pretty good overall, so I do have an excitement for season 2, but it's these obscure characters that James Gunn keeps pivoting back to. When you're building a universe, a DC universe, you have to have a mix of that. We had Superman, and Supergirl I don't think is a super obscure character, and in my opinion actually was a good movie to go to next. But this year, what's the next movie we have? It's Clayface. We're not even getting a Batman movie in this universe before we're getting a Clayface. We're getting Clayface before Batman. We don't even have Wonder Woman established. We don't have characters like The Flash or Aquaman or Green Lantern. Now, Lanterns is coming out, so that's a good thing. But we don't have these bigger characters in the DC universe. We're going to be focusing on characters like the Creature Commandos, Supergirl, who's kind of both a derivative character, kind of a B-tier, C-list, C-tier character. And that's no knock on the character of Supergirl. And I actually really liked Millie Alcock's portrayal of the character. So this is not me knocking on the character of Supergirl. I'm just talking about the wider audience, the wider fan base here. Then you have these characters. James Gunn's talked about doing a Booster Gold series. At one point, The Authority was being talked about. These characters that the audience really, the larger audience isn't super familiar with. And I'm not saying you can't do projects like this. It can definitely work out. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy, what James Gunn built his big comic book career off of, doing stuff like this, but it was built off of the success, the already existing success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that within that same year you had another tentpole MCU film in Captain America the Winter Soldier. So you had a big successful film like this, an established character. So Marvel Studios felt like they could roll the dice on some characters that the audience wasn't so familiar with. DC needs to get in that habit, and DC doesn't have the handicap that the MCU had of not being able to use all the characters, because at the time, Marvel Studios did not own all of the film rights. They didn't have the rights to the X-Men. The Spider-Man deal with Sony hadn't been made yet. Didn't have the rights to the Fantastic Four. Now they do, but at the time they didn't. So that forced them to kind of mix it up a little bit. DC doesn't have that handicap. They have access to all these characters. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the entire Justice League. They have access to all these characters. So what DC needs to do, and in my opinion, is if you're going to do these obscure characters in that same year, you need to have another project with these bigger characters. So this year we had Supergirl, sure. The next film cannot be Clayface. The next film needs to be like Batman or Wonder Woman, or make the Green Lantern show a movie. That's what we need to do. Now, next year, thankfully, we have Man of Tomorrow. So there's another big film. And what I do like about this DC universe is it does overall feel pretty connected. We had Superman, then we went into Supergirl. Superman was in this movie. Then they leaned into the marketing on that and promoting this character, promoting Superman in this movie. I think we all knew he was just going to be like kind of a cameo appearance. So it's not this like buddy cop team up kind of film. So Superman's not like second billing on this. So it's not like another Superman movie. But DC doesn't have the setup right now, the structure of putting out a big tentpole character and then a smaller character and then another big tentpole character and then a smaller character. That's, I think, what they need to mix and match with, mix it up a little bit. Not saying that James Gunn can't do what he's doing with these more obscure characters, but he needs to mix it up some more with these bigger characters so that the audience who isn't familiar with these characters can at least get excited about all the stuff surrounding that. I mean, if this little project doesn't work out, projects that involve these more obscure characters, if that doesn't work out, that's okay. We've still got Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. We have the Justice League. And that's also kind of the weird thing about this DC universe is it's not really establishing the Justice League just yet. I'm curious as to how that's all going to come about. The DC universe, DC Studios needs to look into maybe making some adjustments on their lineup every year. So, I mean, we have Supergirl already came out. Lanterns is coming out, which I am excited for. I love the Green Lantern character. I'm excited this is both a Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart project. So I'm excited for that. I wish it was a movie, not a show, but looking forward to that. But then we have Clayface. Again, that's the weird thing. Why are we not having a Batman movie before we get Clayface? It's kind of a weird thing. And they're going to have a lot of work cut out for them. They better hope that this movie is just one of the best film horror experiences ever, because if it's not and it's another mediocre experience, kind of like what Supergirl was, DC's in trouble. And they've already been in trouble, and they've been trying to dig themselves out of the hole they kind of dug themselves into with the mishandling of the DCEU. I love some of the projects in the DCEU, but that whole thing was just completely mishandled. You had actors constantly leaving, not sure if they're going to stick around. Okay, they're coming back, no, they're leaving again. So much the audience just doesn't know what to get excited for. The DCU cannot do that. So if they decide they're going to reboot again, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to be excited for where the DC universe is going forward. I just hope whoever it is, if James Gunn doesn't stick around and they decide to get somebody else as the studio head, they better have a very clear vision of where they're going, what they're going to do. I'm not saying they need to know every single project they're going to be doing, but they need to know what Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 are of this first book of the DC universe. And James Gunn says he's got, Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, but we don't know what the full picture of this Chapter 1 looks like. Is Man of Tomorrow the end of Chapter 1? There's a lot of other projects they've already announced that haven't even gone into production or were going to, and now they're not. So what's up with Batman the Brave and the Bold? What's up with the Swamp Thing film? Again, another obscure character that we're focusing on over some of these more popular characters. That's a very frustrating thing with the DC universe right now, and I'm hoping that this universe succeeds. I'm one of those people that I'm not a Gunn hater, not a Snyder hater. I'm just a fan of DC Comics, and I want this universe to succeed. Would I have liked to have seen more from the DCEU? Yes, I would have liked to have seen more of that. I would have loved to have seen Henry Cavill continue as Superman. But now we got David Cornsweet, who I love as this character. He's so good, very Christopher Reeve-esque, but has definitely made the character his own, especially when we saw more of him in Supergirl. Just solidifies that I love this guy as Superman, so I really want to see him continue on as the character. I'm so glad he gets another opportunity to do that in Man of Tomorrow next year. And I also really enjoyed Millie Alcock as Supergirl. I'm excited to see more of her, excited that she's going to be in Man of Tomorrow. So what I'm really hoping for is that I think they need to mix it up. And then the next thing they need to do is trust the process. Trust these characters that you set up. It kind of goes back to point 1, but point 3 is just trust these characters. You don't get, for a lack of a better term, gun shy of where you're taking the universe. Do you need to pivot in some aspects? Sure, but don't throw the entire thing out the window and start your plan over from scratch. Maybe tighten up the writing. I think with Supergirl, the weakest aspect of that movie was the writing. I would say get the writer of Supergirl off of the other projects that she's working on. She's currently working on the Wonder Woman script. I don't think she needs to stay on that project anymore, because I think Supergirl, from what I know, this was one of her first big things that she's worked on, and it's kind of a mistake. If this is your first big thing you're working on, I don't think it should be a blockbuster film. Let's test your writing skills out somewhere else on maybe an independent project. If you can prove yourself over there, then come over and do a big blockbuster. Especially don't do it on your second film out on a universe that you're trying to get the audience on board with, when the audience and the fan base is already divided over whether or not we should go back to the DCEU, whether or not we should stay with the DCU, or whether or not we should just abandon both entirely and start 100% completely from scratch. I think in the perfect world, starting over from scratch would have been best for the DCU, but that's not what happened. So let's stick with the DCU, establish some trust and some faith in the fan base. They got to get us fans really on board with where we're going in the DC universe. If we're ever going to get excited for this, we're going to get hyped for it, if it's ever going to get on the same level that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was, they need to do that for DC fans, because DC fans have had it kind of rough. It's been very up and down with DC fans. Marvel fans as of late haven't had it the greatest. Now the last couple of years have been a little better, but the Multiverse Saga, it was a little up and down, but nowhere near to what it has been for DC. I am hoping, as a huge DC fan, I love these characters. I'm just hoping for a universe, a cinematic universe. It's exciting. It's one that we can all get on board with, one that we can get excited for. That's what they got to look at with what to do going forward. So would I replace James Gunn? No, I want to see where he's going to take this universe. But there's some stuff that we do need to adjust. Not everything can feel like a Gunn project. Supergirl kind of feels like it was directed by James Gunn. Doesn't feel like it was directed by Craig Gillespie. So we need to be able to differentiate these projects. And that's something that they really need to address going forward. I have hope for the DC universe. But again, with the whole Warner Brothers Paramount possible merger, it's probably going to be happening. We're going to see where this is all going to go. I don't know if the Ellisons are going to want to keep Gunn on, if Gunn's going to want to stay on because of the Ellisons' leadership. We're just going to have to kind of, wait and see. And I hope that there's a bright spot for the future of the DC universe. I'm not as optimistic about it right now as I was beforehand. I really thought the Supergirl was going to be a wonderful project. I've heard that the source material for Woman of Tomorrow was really great. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard nothing but great things about the source material. And then we got this movie. And now let's go ahead and go on to what I'll call my review for Supergirl. So for Supergirl, I'll tell you this. I enjoyed the movie to an extent. Not overall, but to an extent. I didn't hate the movie, but I didn't love it. It's in that middle portion for me. And I'll admit, for the second movie out, I'm not a Gunn hater, but I did enjoy the early stage of the DCEU more than I've enjoyed the early stage of the DCU. I think Man of Steel is a better movie than Superman. And I think Batman vs. Superman, particularly the Ultimate Edition, is a better movie than Supergirl. But does that mean that I hate the Gunverse, the DC Universe? No. I really enjoyed Superman last year. It set up so many great things for where the DC Universe can go. So don't mishear me here. I did enjoy that film. Did I love Millie Alcock as Supergirl? Yes, she was so good in this role. And there were so many things about this movie that I actually really enjoyed. And at first, when I started watching this movie, I was wondering, where's that negativity? Where's this bad film that I kept hearing about? Why do so many people not care for this version of or at least this movie? What is it that's not landing? Because I'd say the first half of the movie, I was on board with. The action I heard was kind of messy. I thought it was very entertaining, widely entertaining. I thought it worked really well. The character Supergirl, thought she worked really well. The bond between her and Krypto, I heard, was something that they should have gone a little bit more into in this movie. But for me, it worked from the very beginning. Understood their bond, understood why she was mad, why she went on this trip, why she went on this whole mission. Totally made sense to me, and I was on board with it. I was having a lot of fun with this movie. Jason Momoa as Lobo is perfect in this role, and I can't wait to see more of him as Lobo. But then we got halfway through the movie, and the main thing that I'll point out that really didn't work for me was the message that Supergirl was telling Ruthie of, you can't kill Krem because it'll hurt you as a person. You'll take this with you for the rest of your life. You'll never be able to let that go. There's a major issue with this because, for one, Krem has done some very awful things. Now, I'm not advocating for murder. Not whatsoever. I'm not advocating for that, but it would be very understandable for a character like this to go on this revenge trip and then finally get their revenge. And for everything he did, for the trafficking that Krem has done, all this terrible stuff, murdering her entire family for another, I mean, you would totally understand where this character is going on. And then Supergirl, we would need a reason as to why she's saying this, because we never really got a context anywhere in the movie that was Supergirl holding on to something that she had done. That's what the movie needed to do, was show us a point in her life where she regretted taking a life. And now she holds that. And she takes that with her everywhere she goes. But just out of the blue, she just blurts this out and tells Ruthie, no, you can't do this. I don't understand where this is coming from for the character, because we're not familiar with this version of Supergirl, so we don't know why she has this. We see what happened to her people on Krypton, but one does not really equate the other. One does not connect to the other. So there's an issue here with the messaging, with the reasoning, and we don't know what the motivation is. Where does the motivation of her saying this come from? And that's the biggest thing. And that's where the writing really started to falter. And then the whole second half of the film, it suffers from a lot of this kind of stuff. They pushed this so far, and then the character of Ruthie, for me, unfortunately, just kind of got on my nerves. They try to make the character funny, try to make her a straight-nosed character, and it comes off more as annoying rather than heartfelt and sincere. And that's where the writing, the direction of this character, I didn't really get emotions out of this actress. I didn't feel like there was much range in the performance here. So I don't know if this was the actress's fault or if this was Craig Gillespie's fault, if he didn't direct her properly. I don't know. There's just some stuff that didn't click in this part of the film. We get to the end of the movie, and then the whole end, it wraps up the party girl stage of Supergirl. She decides, I don't want to do this anymore, and it doesn't really feel like there's a reason as to why we have to get to that point with the character, but we don't have it. There's not a natural progression to show the development of Supergirl throughout this film. So there's issues in the writing and the portrayal, even the exposition. A movie that could be very dialogue heavy, but doesn't give you the proper exposition. So usually I'd say go for show, don't tell. There's not even an issue of telling too much. Us as an audience we're kind of confused as to why Supergirl makes this progress as a character over time, and how she gets to that motivating factor at the end to decide to change her life, to become more of the hero that Superman, that Clark always wanted her to be. And there's no connection there. Supergirl, the biggest fault of this film was the writing. This film was written by Ana Noguera, and I don't think that she needs to stay on with DC. Definitely shouldn't be the writer on the Wonder Woman film anymore. I just don't have any trust in this writer because of what she delivered with Supergirl. So this film does have some good aspects to it, but the writing is where it really started to fall apart in the second half of the film, and I can't really forgive them for that. It was very amateur, very day one writing. There's so many things. As I'm not a professional writer, but I look at this, I could just take a glance at the script if they would have showed it to me, and I could have told you, you're missing some elements here. and they missed that with Supergirl. So my overall review of this film is I enjoyed it to an extent. It has some good stuff. There's some good bones in this. There would have been a good movie in here had they just worked on the script a little harder. It's like this wasn't even a draft. This was a concept of a draft, and they just decided to run with that and make the movie. And it really disappoints me because this is the second movie out of this new DC universe with DC Studios. This is their second film after Superman, and they're trying to rebuild the trust with the audience, with the fan base, with DC, and there's still so much division between people who want to go back to the DCEU, people who love the DCU, so much yelling across the aisle, and this was a movie that needed to be great and unfortunately was just okay. Okay is not good enough for DC right now. They have to have some really, really good, it has to be at least good in this movie. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just okay. And that's almost worse than being a bad movie, because at the end of all this, it's going to become a forgettable movie. We're not even going to remember that this movie came out. We're not going to remember what the plot was, and we're going to forget what the good aspects of this movie were as well, because there were some good. It's not as bad as a lot of the people online are saying, so we need to take that into account. This movie's not as bad as everybody's saying it is, but it is unfortunately a knock against the new DC universe, and they've got to take account into what they did here. They got to start working on this stuff, make it a little better. They got to tweak these scripts and make sure they're really ready to go before they go into production. The writing, at the very least, has to be top notch when you go into a project like this, and unfortunately it just wasn't there. If I'm going to give this movie a rating, it's got to be a 3.5 out of 5 or a B- on the letter scale. Again, not a bad score, not a great score, but sometimes I'll see a movie that's a 3.5 out of 5 and I'll come out of that experience really enjoying it, really looking forward to maybe there'll be a sequel to this. There's a lot of good here that they could build upon, but I was more disappointed, I think, with this movie than I was overall. So unfortunately for this movie, with it getting a 3.5 out of 5, I was expecting a lot more out of it. I was at least expecting this movie to get a 4, hopefully a 4.5, and it just didn't get that. So I might be a little generous in the score I'm giving this movie. I don't think it's not entirely bad. It's not entirely great. It's just okay. And at the end of the day, I'm going to forget this movie really ever happened. So if you've seen Supergirl, go down in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this movie. Do you think it's a step in the right direction for the DC universe? Do you think it's a step in the wrong direction? Do you think that the DC universe needs to be completely rebooted once again? Go down in the comment section, let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. So that was Supergirl. This whole podcast is going to be very DC heavy today. So let's go ahead and look at what's next for DC. We got Lanterns on the way, and we got Clayface on the way. Now, I kind of have talked about this in some other videos before. I really want to talk about this today because I think it's very important to know where we're at with Lanterns. I've heard some mixed things about the show online from people who worked on the project. People have heard about stuff with the project. It just seems like there is a lot of good with the series. There could be a lot of promise here, but it might not be meshing. There's some key components that might not be working together. Now, if Lanterns doesn't work, and I've also heard some things about Clayface that I think overall I've heard Clayface is going to be pretty good. They're about to go into reshoots, and we'll see if they start reworking things after the response from Supergirl. If this whole year, we come out of this year and they've reworked all of these projects, have had absolutely no faith in the projects that they went into and making Lanterns and doing Clayface, we're going to be in trouble with DC. If everything rides on Man of Tomorrow's success next year, we're basically starting over again. And where do we go from there? What are the projects we're working on after Man of Tomorrow? That's something that I would love to know as a fan. As a fan of DC and where we're going. Even James Gunn himself has said that he doesn't quite know where the direction of the larger DC universe is going after Man of Tomorrow. I would like to know where it's going after Man of Tomorrow. I don't need to know the beat by beat, like, I don't need to know the whole picture. I don't need to see the whole picture, but I'd at least like to know the direction, or like, when are we getting the Justice League? Is that something that we're building towards? What's the ultimate end of just chapter 1? I don't need to know the full vision of the saga, the equivalent of the Infinity Saga or the Multiverse Saga. Whatever this big major saga that they're building towards, or this first book of the DC universe, what it's going to be. I don't need to know the whole thing. I would at least like to know what this chapter of Gods and Monsters is about, because for me, at the very least, all these projects have been connected to each other. There have been elements that have carried over from project to project. Creature Commandos, you have characters like Amanda Waller, you have characters like Rick Flag Sr. Rick Flag Sr. does continue on into Superman, which was the next project. Superman, you have characters like Rick Flag Sr., like Lex Luthor, that go on into Peacemaker Season 2, and Peacemaker himself had a cameo in Superman, so you have those connections. Of course, then you go into Supergirl. Supergirl was established in a cameo appearance in Superman, and Superman himself is in Supergirl. So you have these connecting threads, and that's great, and I love that. But I don't know where we're going for the larger DC universe, and if there's no clear direction post Man of Tomorrow, then what are we doing? What is the ultimate goal here? And I would like to know, what is the overall story of where we're going? Again, I don't need to know the whole story, but I would at least like to know where chapter 1 is headed. It's like when you get a book and you can read the little synopsis on the back, it kind of tells you what to expect going into the book. Now, I mean, I don't need to know each chapter. I don't want to know that until I start reading it, but I would at least like to know what the overall vision for this is going to be. What am I getting myself into? And I don't know what I'm getting myself into with Gods and Monsters. I don't know what that synopsis is for this chapter. I've just been told the title, but that doesn't tell me anything about what the overall vision for this chapter is supposed to be. So I would like to have some clarity on that, and I think we need that. Now, for these projects like Lanterns, again, I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to it, but if Lanterns is in trouble, and if Clayface is in trouble, we might be in trouble with this current phase of the DC Universe. And if these projects don't work, I can guarantee you that they'll be looking for some new leadership for DC Studios once the Paramount Warner Brothers merger finishes. And I don't want that. I want some consistency in leadership. But if we keep changing it like we did in the old DCEU days, we're in for a very rocky couple of years until they decide to ultimately reboot once again. And that's what I'm hoping we don't get with the current DC Universe, hoping for its success, praying for its success. I don't know where we go from here, but you let me know down in the comments where we go from here with this current stage of the DC Universe. Are we in for a good time? Are we in for a short time? You let me know. I'd love to hear from you. All right, that'll do it for me for today for Talking Movies and More. Hope you all enjoyed this podcast. Go down in the comment section and let me know what your thoughts were on all of the topics discussed here today. Very DC heavy, really just talked about Supergirl and the state of the DC Universe, where we're headed from here, and what my hopes are for the future, and what I think that DC needs to do going forward as they get into these next couple of projects. Let me know what your thoughts were on all the topics discussed here today. I'd love to hear from you. A little housekeeping. Remember that this podcast goes out when Hayden and I can't get together for the assembly cut. Now, we've only been able to get together once, but we are hoping to get together again very soon for our second episode of the assembly cut. But until then, you've got me here with this one-on-one conversation we do in Talking Movies and More. Again, expect the next episode of this podcast to go out next Wednesday. I want to keep some consistency here. So for this podcast, I always expect it to go out on Wednesdays, and I will be planning to do that going forward in the future. So you can expect it to be a consistent series here on the channel. Another thing to talk about, I've got 2 new YouTube channels. Now, I've already talked about my gaming channel. It's called MP Games and More. That's where I talk about my love of video games, my history with video games, and just anything I want to talk about concerning video games. I've already done a video about the 10-year anniversary of Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. That video is up on the channel right now. It's actually surprisingly doing very well for the first video out on that channel. I'm so excited for the performance of that video. It's done so well, and I'm glad it's resonated with so many people. So if you're a fan of video games and you want to hear me talk about video games as well, go support me on MP Games and More. Also, I'm a big fan of theme parks. I love going to Disney World. There's a theme park that's about 2 hours away from me that's called Silver Dollar City. I've started to do some coverage on theme parks and my love of theme parks, what I love about the theme park experience. It's called MP Theme Parks and More. So you can go follow me over there. I'd love to have your support on that channel as well. I love you supporting this channel, and I thank you so much for being here with me today. Hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.